lead heads. Welcome back to the Talking Lead podcast. This is episode 204, and we have got a very special show for you lead heads this week, and we're going to get into that in just 1 second. I just want to give a big thanks to everybody that was on the show last week. Squatch, the Zeekster, joining us for the Jackwagon train last week. Make sure you guys check WTN. Was it? Is it 99.7, Casey? 99.7 WTN?
I believe so.
Talk radio, 6 o'clock on Saturday. This coming Saturday, Lefty is going to be on that radio show. So check that out. It's called the Projectile Dysfunction. And then, of course, our interviews that we had from the NRA. I'd like to thank Tom from IWI, Chase from Zenith Firearms, and, of course, our host during that segment was High Threat Concealment, Adam Garrison, which he was going to join us today, but unfortunately he wasn't able to join us for this special edition of Talking Lead that we're having for episode 204. And then the winner of our contest, make sure you listen to the end of the show here, and I'll announce the winner of the dysfunction or the projectile dysfunction giveaway. So let's go ahead and get into this show, because this is probably going to be a pretty long show, but it's going to be very interesting. I know you guys are going to enjoy it. So what we're going to be talking about today is the recent Army's decision for their new handgun. It's the was it the XM17 project? Is that what they're calling it?
Yep.
Yep. So joining us on the call today, we have John Peterson, Nate Love, Mike McCarthy may be joining us a little bit later. He hasn't joined us yet. And then Casey Griggs is with us. And Nate, you've got Ken with you, right?
Yeah, Ken Hine.
Ken Hine. So what I want to do is I want to go around and everybody introduce yourselves and kind of qualify yourselves for this discussion, which we're going to be talking about the Modular Handgun System competition, the previous handgun that the Army, the military had chosen for their issue, the current one that's been selected, and then the other ones that didn't get selected. And we're just going to kind of give our thoughts and perspective on the whole thing. So let's start with Casey. Everybody knows Casey Griggs, CG3G. Introduce yourself, Casey.
What's going on? Well, most of you know me as Casey Griggs 3-Gunner, sponsored by Nordic Components and Mossberg and a couple others, and Talking Lead. So kind of been in the military for 15 years, going on 15 years, trying to finish 20, and I'm an instructor now, so hopefully.
And you've got some duty time, active duty.
I got 2 years in Iraq, 15 months, and then the second one was 12, so one was in Balad and at Five Orion, the second was at Camp Taji.
And you've seen combat?
Yes.
Yeah. And you were issued the Beretta, right?
Beretta 92F, yeah.
92.
It's a different firearm, that's for sure.
We'll get into that. Okay, John Peterson, welcome to the show.
How's it going?
Going good, buddy.
I'm John Peterson. First time I touched a military pistol was in 1987. I was issued in 1911 when I was a machine gunner in the infantry. Later on, got in the Army Special Forces, and we were issued the 1911 and then the M9 all the way up through about 03. And capped off my time. I was in the Guard and Active Duty Special Forces, but I capped off my 20 years with my final year, part of that in Afghanistan on our deployment with our unit. And aside from that, while in the Guard, I was an instructor at Smith & Wesson Academy and then what's now called Sig Sauer Academy. So I had a chance to play around with and work with a lot of the other competing products that were going on, and had a little bit of involvement with the R&D process for some of the military weapon systems and procurement. I got to be a tester, not on this particular system we're going to be talking about, but some others.
Okay, cool. Nate, Mr. Nate Love, Frontier Tactical, sponsors of Talking Lead, by the way.
We are sponsors of your awesome show. Owner of Frontier Tactical, we do the multiple caliber system, the Warlock. So my background was I was 11 Bravo infantry in the Army for about 10 years. Got out, went to gunsmith college, and from there got picked up to be a small arms repairer and then senior weapons inspector over in Afghanistan and Iraq as well, and also through the U.S. So everything from unit level armor all the way up to depot stuff. Worked on every weapon system that the military uses. So that includes all the pistols, all the SIGs, all the Glocks that were local procured, all the 1911s, all the M9 series. So pretty much the other side of the pistol. I was issued an M9 Beretta series, and that was as an infantry guy, and then worked on everything on the backside. So that's kind of my qualification.
Okay. And Ken?
My name's Ken Hine. Served 28 years in the U.S. Army. Started in '83, went all the way through to when I retired in 2011. So during my military service, served in combat during Desert Storm and then again in Iraq in 07, 08. Also served as a contractor in Afghanistan from 2012 to 2014. During my service, I carried both the 1911 and the Beretta 9mm. As far as any other background in arms, I'm currently working with Frontier Tactical as an assistant to Nate Love, so that we can work on expanding my knowledge in weapons.
Very good. And I guess Mike has not joined us yet.
He is working through a Skype update. I think you called that one, Marty.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll get him in when he joins us. We'll get his intro, but we'll go ahead and start. So, what is the modular handgun system competition, and what initiated it? I guess that's what we should talk about first. So, I've got a copy of the RFP, thanks to John, and kind of the page 2 of that. I'm just going to read this. I think it kind of breaks it down and explains it pretty good on what this process is. So I'm going to read this real quick, and that'll give Mike some time to get in. So it says the U.S. Army Contracting Command, New Jersey, Picatinny Arsenal, New Jersey, on behalf of the program manager, Soldier Weapons, has a requirement for the Modular Handgun System, MHS, for the purpose of this request for proposal, which is an RFP, and resulting contracts. The MHS will consist of the handguns, associated ammunition, and supporting accessories to include spare parts. Interested vendors will be required to supply all the items as described in Section B under the resulting contract. The acquisition strategy is to conduct a full and open competition that will utilize the trade-off method to evaluate and select the best value systems submitted that meets the MHS requirements as described in this RFP and attach purchase descriptions in accordance with the Federal Acquisition Regulation, FAR, Part 15. The MHS procurement is intended to be an open caliber competition, which means the choice of caliber is left to the discretion of the offerer. So the people competing, I guess, get to choose what caliber they want to enter into the contest. Offerers are permitted to submit up to 2 proposals configured to the specific caliber it chooses for evaluation. If an offerer chooses to submit 2 proposals, their submissions must each be chambered in a different cartridge of the offerer's choosing. In addition, each proposal must be submitted independently from each other. Each proposal will consist of either a 2 handgun solution, 1 full-size, 1 compact, or 1 handgun solution that meets requirements for both a full-size and compact weapon, plus the following ammunition: ball, special purpose, and dummy-drilled inert, DDI, as well as accessories to include spare parts. Offers will have 150 days from the issue date of the RFP. Each offerer will be required to conduct a contractor product instruction training demonstration session to the government on the hardware and the manuals, and the government schedule those times. The government intends to award up to 3 firm fixed price, FFP, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts based on the results of the initial evaluation of the proposal submission by following the evaluation procedures contained in Section M of the RFP. The government will then make a final down selection to a single contractor by following the evaluation procedures contained in Section H or M, whatever, The period of performance of the base contracts will be 10 years for the handgun, accessories, and spares, and 5 years for the ammunition. I don't know that this goes on and helps us understand anything else, but that's pretty much what they're trying to accomplish with this MHS. Would you guys agree that pretty much sums it up there?
Yep.
Okay, so
yeah, the rest of the details get more boring and people fall asleep. But yeah, that's what it goes into.
Right. So this RFP is 351 pages long. That was page 2 of this request for proposal, and I mean there's a lot more stuff in here. So that's basically what the people submitting the guns or their firearms for consideration are expected. That's what's expected out of them. So. Let's go to John. Do you know all the people that had offerings in this competition?
I've seen the list, but I've been kind of more focused on what's happening next. Man.
Right. Well,
I don't know if
it's pretty much everybody you would. Yeah, it's pretty much everybody you would expect. Obviously, Sig, Glock, Smith and Wesson, Beretta had an entrant, and I don't know who else might have had.
I'll get the full list for you though.
Yeah, I mean, I had a list of them, but it's the main people that you would expect. So what the Army's currently using, I mean, obviously they're unhappy with their current issued firearm, the Beretta
92F.
Yeah, 92F, which they call what, the
M9 series.
M9 series.
Yeah, the M9. So the new one is what do they call it, the 17 or something like that?
Well, XM17 for now.
Yeah, the XM17 for now.
Most things are going to start out, especially in the weapons platforms, they're going to start with an X until they're
experimental, right? Yeah, they're testing them out.
Right.
Well, the other one, Tim, too, you probably aware is that the Beretta was actually approaching the end of its service life. That it's anticipated to, that the gun's supposed to last. And I know that in this RFP it says instead of 20 years, it says 10 years.
Right. They've made this one 10 years. So was it previously 20 years? Is that what the agreement was?
I believe so, but I remember reading specifically that Beretta was going to have to compete again anyways because they had already been coming up with new versions of the M9 to recompete,
mm-hmm.
and that the Army specifically put out that the Beretta M9 was reaching the end of its service life.
Okay. So does anybody have any idea on the previous process that they had for choosing the service weapon?
Before you go into that process, I would probably preface that with something that most people don't know, and that is that although the Beretta is the primary DoD-wide service pistol, there are other service pistols used, just not as largely within all of the military branches. So you have the SIGs, there are 220 series, so the 220, 225s, 226s, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
There are smaller amounts of Glocks. There are smaller amounts of other pistols like the 1911s that are at less known units. They're not widely accepted throughout the military branches. So you've got different units using different pistols, but basically military-wide, it is the Beretta M9 series. So,
right. And this is the Army's selection process, and I think maybe the Marines may have signed on with it as well. Is that correct?
That remains to be seen. A lot of that comes through the testing process and the different channels that they use to procure.
Yeah.
Because because
the Army chooses this, it doesn't mean the Air Force necessarily is going to accept whatever guns picked or any of the other branches.
Right.
Not at all.
Right. Okay.
Well, maybe something you guys probably knew as well, but something that may have been a contributing factor in all this is, because Nathan just mentioned the other issued pistols, that I know one of the most prevalent ones, at least numerically, was the M11, which is a Sig P320.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And those were getting issued, it's going back like 20 years now, but CID, criminal investigators and counterintelligence and a few others were getting those. And I had a chance actually to train a couple units that was their primary issued gun. Where our unit just provided some extra opportunity training and for them, some protection guys that protect like generals in the military. And they were pretty happy with the gun. Obviously liked it better than the Beretta. But the reputation that gun gained, not just in the Army, but the Air Force, OSI, and others had it. And a lot of the DoD entities, a lot of them where there's civilians that are issued guns, were getting this gun. And then others started asking for it. as a concealment gun. And then, of course, a few years ago, they won the upgrade to that, which I think is called the M11A1. It was reported widely in the gun press, but that gun seemed to do pretty well. They only had to make a couple of changes to it, and of course now Sig, they put a stainless steel slide that's made in New Hampshire on that thing, which makes it even more durable for the field. But I know personally from teaching a number of people that were issued that gun, they were quite happy and they didn't want to give the thing up. So
I absolutely love that.
I was reading later though that, and it was more rumor control, that there were a lot of people reporting to the folks at Picatinny Arsenal, like, look, we're happy with the Sig that we've got. And of course the SEALs will tell you about what they feel about their Sigs. So, and of course that gun also ran, the Sig's got an upgrade in the SEALs. They switched from the older version, national stock number, to the new one with the stainless slide, which I ended up owning a copy of. I actually owned one of the test guns that were sent as one of 5 to the SEALs to test for mean rounds between stoppages. And when I was an employee at Sig, they sold it to me, just more as a novelty thing.
I got one sitting right back here by Casey on the desk.
So maybe the fact that they had such a good track record, not just with the other ones Nathan issued, a lot of people don't realize the P220 and P225 and some others actually had NSNs, stock numbers, and were available for issue. But,
right.
They did have a good track record with the Navy Special Warfare Command, and I don't know, probably about 6 different places in the military I knew of were getting the M11s.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about let's go ahead and talk about the Beretta. And I mean, obviously it was time for that, I guess, that contract to end. So, the government opened it up for newer modern guns, and, with their criteria that they were looking for, it had to be modular. They wanted it more lethal, which, you would think that meant a different caliber, but they went with the 9mm again. And I think it actually went with a shorter barrel too, with the Sig versus the Beretta.
Yeah, there's a shorter barrel in that.
Yeah.
In the Sig.
So, what other criteria were they looking for? Do we have that?
Well, John's absolutely correct with all the other systems that were out there and who they were issued to. One of the things that is an underlying factor, though, that doesn't always make it into the written form, as we know for the procurement process, is its acceptability of NATO calibers.
Yep.
Because we have that requirement if we're going to continue working with NATO countries. So that ammunition requirement is usually written directly into the proposals and RFPs that they put out, although it's not always directly stated. Well, so a lot of that ends up being, dreaming or pie in the sky stuff when people start talking about changing calibers to things that may or may not be more lethal based on the testing criteria. So when you say, 40 Smith & Wesson or 45 ACP, those are all great and desirable over 9mm FMJ. But when you go out there into NATO country ammunition stocks, you're not going to find a whole lot of that. You're going to find a lot of 9mm, 9x19, 9mm Parabellum or Luger, whatever they're calling it. That's what's in the stock, and that's what we have to be able to use and share.
Yeah.
Well, plus one of the specs was that the gun had to be able to fire a newer authorized hollow point. I think they call it the XM1153 special purpose ammo that Sig developed. That was actually included in the contract that the military will be able to obtain and use that ammunition. That's something that wasn't too widely reported, but I think is pretty significant.
Right.
I would agree with you heavily on that.
Yeah, but then as we read through the RFP, it didn't say anything about hollow points. It said the 3 types were the ball, the inert, and what was the other one? I can't remember.
The dummy drilled.
Yeah, that was the inert, and then there was another one.
Then there was the special purpose one. That's the one that John's
okay, that's the special. Okay, so that would qualify for the hollow point special purpose. Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Perfect. So before we get into the newer handgun, let's talk about the older one and the reasons why it needed to be replaced. I mean, obviously, it didn't get good reviews throughout its career, and you guys have firsthand knowledge with that firearm. So, what were some of the issues that you? We'll start off with the negatives, and then we'll talk about any pros, because I think the negatives are going to outweigh the pros, the cons versus the pros.
Well, one of the negatives that I got about it, one of the negatives that I have about it in Iraq in 04-05, and I don't know when they come out with the new mags, but was feeding issues. The springs would stick inside the magazines and cause a lot of jams due to the sand. And, just it being an open top pistol, I mean, I know that sounds not significant in some things, but the dirt, sand, grit, and everything would get down inside of it. And for us, it just caused issues, especially when you're around like a lot of Bradleys and things of that nature, stuff that kicks up dust nonstop. Mm-hmm. And that's just some of the issues that we had with it. Was just
I don't know many battlefield conditions that aren't going to have dirt. So, I mean, you think that would have been something that they would have tried to have tested beforehand?
Well, the dirt in Iraq tends to turn to solid concrete when it gets wet and then dries. Yeah. So
you got to remember when we changed over too. At that time, we weren't really in the desert. It was we were still wearing woodland camouflage, so we were thinking about being in the woods.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember wearing the wonderful DCU with the woodland camo mix in the middle of Iraq.
Chocolate chips.
I had those too.
Well, Marty, I got 10 reasons that I've been seething over since I got issued one of these for the first time. It's like a list that's growing. And this was going to be in my article, but I'll give it to you. One is that decocker and manual safety lever on the slide is all wrong. And almost every police department in the country abandoned that idea. And every company that makes that ended up offering later a modification where when you actuate it, it actually pops back up. It's a spring-loaded manual safety lever.
Right.
Smith & Wesson, Beretta, everyone, but the troops got left out. The troops get stuck with a gun that when you go to rack the slide, like for a stoppage, you can actually dead man the gun by accidentally pushing that lever down. And later on in the Special Forces, we were allowed to keep that lever up. We did not have to have it down being used as a manual safety lever. We were allowed to keep it up, so you basically had, a double action first round without having to flick a switch. But the second one was that traditional double action, double single. A lot of us feels obsolete. I had to teach on those guns for 6 years at 2 companies, plus, being issued the thing over 15. But it's really just too hard to learn, and a lot of the troops just aren't given the time to train on learning that specific trigger system that I believe it was the Germans invented with the P38, the old German P38 pistol. Mm-hmm. But I think it's too much training. It's too much to deal with. And the nice thing about the P320 Sig, the Mark, I guess it'll be called the M17, but, is you got one same hole every single time. The top of the slide on the Beretta is not beefy enough to really get good purchase with your hand if you got a racket or you got a stoppage. In fact, it's hard to rack the thing because it's got a rounded top to it. The Italians do nice at making artsy-looking and peculiar-looking guns. I mean, Pietro Beretta is 600 years old or something, but we need something that when you're wearing gloves or you're in the field, you can just grab it and rack it.
Yeah.
The other one is, I think one of the other guys mentioned that open top slide, exposed the barrel to not only rust and grime, but I know almost every single day we're in Afghanistan, we had to take these things apart and wipe them out. Unless you carried it in one of those transportation pouch holsters that the military issued, that UM84 Bianchi holster, which I don't think anybody was using by the time the war started. But the other problem with that Beretta is those magazines are probably the most rustable magazines I've seen in my career. Those things were just, I've seen where they got stuck in the gun and would not come out and be in the field. And then, of course, you may have heard that for years the Berettas began developing problems with cracked locking blocks, which is a design feature they took from the German P38, that lowering and rising locking block, the ears of it would shear. Some slides were cracking, and we had broken barrels. Now, I never had any of these happen, except for once I saw a broken locking block, and that was after going through a 5,000-round shooting course. But another bad sign that we saw was a lot of guys were not buying this gun off-duty. When we started getting it issued in 1990-91, almost nobody was buying Berettas to shoot off-duty. We were all buying other types of guns, to do our off-duty training. And that's a bad sign. A lot of troops buy 1911s. Like when we had the 1911, a lot of guys owned them because you might as well try to get good at what you're issued. So my prediction is, and of course, hoping that the SIG goes forward, that once this thing gets issued and guys start to like it, they're also going to want to buy it to practice with or carry, off-duty. And then the final thing with that darn Beretta is you can't remove the front sight. It's a fixed sight. It's milled into the frame. There's no way to take that thing out of there. And that is especially a problem when you try to put a suppressor on the gun. You cannot use most suppressors with the military-issued M9 pistol unless it's got, I think there was one that we were given that had a sight on the suppressor, you say, and it actually had a locking feature that reached back and it would lock the slide and battery, so you had a almost completely suppressed shot. It wouldn't allow the slide to cycle. But and that only a few people got issued that thing, and some pilots and stuff. But so there's my top 10 list. I'm sure there's more, but those were the gripes that we had, and we tried reporting those to the folks at Picatinny Arsenal, and it fell on deaf ears.
I was thinking
told, nope, this is the this is the handgun platform system that we will have for the foreseeable future. See you later.
I was thinking that Beretta was going to try to remanufacture the front sight, but I never heard any more on that.
Well, they did, and for the recompete, they did have a candidate, and I know that the Army Marksmanship Unit at Fort Benning had done all manner of modifying Berettas to make them shootable.
Definitely.
Those, and I actually went through some training and Special Forces training with a guy who had actually worked at the AMTU down there and was a gunsmith for them. So I got an earful about how great the Beretta was, but that's only because they had the latitude that the rest of the Army didn't have, which was to fix it. But I think a major turning point was around 2001, and everybody was getting more focused towards CQB and counterterrorism, and they wanted to be able to put lights and stuff on these guns and suppressors, and it's just hard to, it's kind of hard to do. We had those giant Surefire P60s, those giant contraptions that you stick on a Beretta, but we had no holsters to put them in,
Well, I believe that whole
all of this is now.
I believe that whole playing field is fixing to change from between the Beretta and the Sig, because one of the guys that I happen to know that shoots the Bianchi Cup got to shoot, I believe, with the new Sig X. Is that right? Am I saying that right? The new 21 round.
I don't know.
It's their new competition version they've got out, and he loved it. And he still loves that pistol.
So Nate, talk about your experience with the Beretta.
So John did a great job of going down his top 10 list of major failures with the M9 series platform. I will add to that. He did mention about the locking blocks already, and the slides cracking as well. What the military did on the back end, on the maintenance side of things, is they usually implement what are called modification work orders. It's essentially, modification work order, or MWOs, cover a large area. They can be anything from new additional things that they want to add and integrate into an existing platform, or it can be the equivalent of a recall, which is not called a recall. It's called we're going to fix this stuff quietly and call it a modification work order. The locking blocks were a #1 source of some of the MWOs that went into the M9 series. Also, one of the MWOs that came out was with the M9A1, which did incorporate that rail that John was getting into with having the added lights. And we all know, the Picatinny rail is the greatest thing to happen to the AR-15 since, anything. So they wanted to integrate that into the service pistol as well. Some of the problems with those MWOs is they didn't address the perfect storm of events that happens when you introduce Joe into the mix, or the soldier, which is they like to do things that are above their level of maintenance and or modification. So we started to see things over there that were user caused, such as local purchase of laser grips. So they would purchase grips and trace and other laser grips. They would remove theirs. They would lose a spring, and I think you know which one it is. Then they would put those grips on and have a malfunctioning pistol. They would also purchase either locally through their unit or themselves from eBay or Amazon or wherever a certain holster that starts with S and ends in IRPA, which were not authorized. The M12 is a flap holster similar to the one that John was talking about. It's the green, ugly nylon one that none of the soldiers wanted to carry. So they would get issued those. Those would invariably find their way into a Connex somewhere and not be used. There would be a 55-gallon drum full of them, and everybody would be running around with cool guy drop-leg holsters that caused numerous problems with the wear of the pistol, which was already kind of light on finish to begin with, which overseas, when you're in any kind of a marine environment, which the Middle East is full of marine environments, even when you think you're in the desert, you just happen to be a couple hundred miles from the coast there, that marine environment finds its way to you in the form of salt deposits. So we had a lot of corrosion issues over there. We had a lot of cleanliness issues, which kind of exacerbated the corrosion as well. And then you got a lot of holster rash from unauthorized duty pistol holsters that everyone's running around with because they saw it in Hollywood. The M9 is also the exact same pistol that you see in, a copy of that you see in Lethal Weapon 4, where Jet Li pulls the slide off. I don't know if you remember that scene. Right. That is the pistol they used for that. Hollywood's actually pretty happy with the 92. They put it in a lot
They used it in all the Lethal Weapon movie. Remember he shot the smiley face?
Yeah, well, that happens to be the one that you can literally, and I've done it before to show people, mag, loaded, round in the chamber, pull the slide right off. That happens to be the pistol that you can do that with. But when you get into the maintenance side and all the moving parts that make up the M9, he was dead accurate when he's talking about that manual safety decocker system. It's locking block mechanism, slides cracking, magazines freezing inside of the mag well due to either corrosion or expansion. It was probably one of the most maintained weapons when it came to repairs and replaces. It literally was the prima donna of maintenance. It took a lot of time, more time than many of the other weapons platforms that we had to service.
Yeah. So that's another consideration, as far as cost goes, the cost of ownership, the maintenance, where one, they may be coming in cheaper, but in the long run, it may cost more to maintain that firearm.
It's absolutely correct. And a lot of what goes into the bidding process is life cycle management. When you start talking about, how many years down the road are we going to be able to procure magwell bodies and springs and followers, et cetera? And do we get them from the manufacturer? Are they subcontract? How is this procurement process for the entire life cycle of this weapons platform that we decide on? And then a lot of that goes into that's why you end up with a 351-page MHS
RFP. Yeah.
RFP. I mean, there's so many things that get written into it, and they probably don't even cover it all in the first one. So wait for that second one to come out.
Ken, talk
Yes.
about your experience.
Just to add, and really, as far as what everything else that's been discussed already, the one thing that I really disliked the most, and because I'm showing my age a little, I was issued a 1911, and so transitioning from the 1911 to the Beretta, probably the biggest difficulty I had was getting used to the trigger, and going to a double action trigger. And the one thing that I'd say that I disliked the most about it was not the fact that it was a double action, because I actually kind of like that. But after the first shot, there was a lot of take up to fire off the next shot. And until you got used to that take up to fire off the next shot, it took you a lot longer to get that second shot off. And that was probably the biggest thing that I disliked about it. I mean, I did carry it for a number of years, especially once I made it to senior rank, E7 and above. That was primarily my issued weapon, but it wasn't my weapon of choice. I still carried my AR, especially when I was outside the wire and I was running in convoys. I didn't want that to be my primary weapon. My primary weapon was the M4, but it was the weapon I was issued with and the one that I qualified with. So I had some experience with it, but it didn't mean that I liked it. I just got used to it.
Right.
And there's no end of jokes about how, you've got a 15-round magazine, but it's very likely that you're just going to throw the pistol, as a form of distraction to get to your rifle.
Well, and that was going to be kind of my question to you guys also is, the pistol is not your primary weapon to begin with. I mean, obviously, you want a reliable backup when you have to go to that. Who uses this as primary? Anybody in the military use the pistol as the primary?
Yes. There's a number of them. Interesting, I got to train all these folks when I worked at those two different companies because, they would all send their instructor types through. Mm-hmm. But you've got the Military CID, who are both, there's uniform and civilian, within DOD. They have, you've got like organizations like NCIS, in the Navy, mm-hmm. The OSI in the Air Force. Army has CID as well as Marine Corps. Then you've got the counterintelligence folks who are in all the armed forces. And most, I believe, are still issued the Sig. They call it the M11A1 now, but it's a PT28 with a stainless slide. Mm-hmm. Obviously the military police, in most cases, that's, their sidearm is their pistol's primary weapon. And then you've got some other nitnoid people who get it, but as a primary gun, specialized type thing. But, mainly the plainclothes types,
right,
as well as the MPs.
The plainclothes of people who aren't in combat, right?
It's something you're seeing a lot more of, and this is, again, somebody mentioned this earlier, but and you're seeing a lot more units, especially special operations, are issuing the pistols. There are certain types of operations where the pistol, whether it's plain clothes, whatever, is the primary weapon, or for off-duty. Like, for instance, I know a couple of times we went to South America and elsewhere, we had pistols. Well, we're on duty 24/7, but I mean, when we were off-duty going into town to get gas or supplies, we would carry concealed and had holsters, which, of course, we had to buy out of pocket because the military wasn't issuing one for us at the time for the Beretta, that is, the M9. So, yeah, you're seeing more of an increase in the number of people who have a pistol as a sidearm these days, especially for intelligence personnel. And for every
especially
troop
civil affairs, too.
I forgot about that. That's right. But what you're also seeing more of now is particularly with intelligence and also with contractors, for every troop, there can be anywhere from 1 to 5 contractors overseas. And I know in a couple of the jobs I was in, I was actually issued the Beretta, the 226, the M11, all these. But with this pistol contract, you're probably going to see a large number of those contractors getting these pistols as well as a primary duty weapon while they're in the war zones.
Right. A lot of what dictates the primary weapon is going to come down to what your job is. And I think John touched on that really well, because a machine gunner is going to have a primary weapon of a machine gun.
Right. But and that's my point. The majority of the people that are getting issued these have an other primary weapon. Correct?
Well, as John mentioned,
yes.
That pistol will be likely their primary, depending on, obviously the combat arms are going to stick to, the heavier weapons, whereas the lighter, the softer jobs, so to speak, you've got civil affairs people running out there in town trying to win hearts and minds. If they're running around with a M16 in someone's face, they're not as adaptable.
Right. Yeah, and I get that. I mean, I understand, but I'm saying the majority of the people that are going to be issued this are going to have another primary weapon. This will be their secondary.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. That's the point I wanted to make.
Yep.
All right. So let's talk about real quick pros. Any pros of the Beretta? I'll let whoever wants to start on that.
Crickets.
Okay, don't everybody talk at once.
Crickets.
Since I was the one who dropped the big list of 10 things that were wrong with the M9, the 2 things I noticed from training a lot of people on it that were positives that most people came back with, thumbs up, and particularly because you do have your diehards that like that gun. But the 2 things that I noticed is a lot of people felt that it shot really smoothly. It was pretty easy to shoot that gun once you get past that double action trigger. The gun eventually will go off. And but once you get to those other 14 shots that are single action, it does shoot very fast. There's a pretty short reset on the single action. But a lot of guys felt that it was a good, smooth shooting gun, and I noticed that too. And honestly, and also for many people, it not all, but it seemed to point well. And unfortunately, though, a lot of these people, this is the first pistol they've ever been issued in their life, and for many, they've ever shot.
Mm-hmm.
So I would preface all this by saying, when you have people saying, "Oh my gosh, we love the M9," or I love having the Beretta issued, and one is you want to ask them how many people they shot with it, or how much training they even had, because a lot of them, the only exceptions I've seen that were experienced people were people that worked in some of our special forces schools and so forth, where they got to shoot that gun a lot, and they naturally are going to get good at any gun they get, you see.
Right.
So they're a little bit biased, I think, and one's a pretty well-known instructor and competition shooter, but, and unfortunately those people influenced the process when this contract originally came up for bid, and I just think that there were too many things with the gun before that were negatives and not enough positives.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I got some positives too.
Okay. Go, Nate.
So one positive that it definitely has over some of the other platforms is that it does have 15 rounds in the magazine. And if you're going to be shooting 9mm full metal jacket, no matter what gun it's coming out of, having more rounds is a positive thing. And as John mentioned, it's extremely easy to qualify with. For what it was intended to do, its job, which is to hit a man-sized target at about 50 feet, it does that. It doesn't take much to get someone to the point where they can qualify with that pistol to get it to do what it's supposed to do. So it does have that. And also, even with the number of people who were putting laser grips on it and not being authorized to do so, we did find that laser is a universal language when it comes to, if you put it on someone's chest, suddenly you have their attention, which we didn't have with some of the local nationals we were working with before. They were used to having guns waved in their face. The moment that you have a laser on their chest, that changed the dynamic and they started listening.
Well, it's just like Iraq, you could point a rifle or point a 25 millimeter cannon in their face, and they didn't care. But the second you drew that handgun, it meant business.
Right.
Knew you're serious.
Yeah, actually, I had a pair of CTC laser grips. It was the second gen that they came out that had the, I don't know if you guys recall, but they went through several versions of them. But they actually gave me 2 sets of them. One was on a blue dummy gun for teaching purposes, but with the laser. But I actually, for the whole 7 months in Afghanistan, didn't shoot anybody with a pistol. But as one of the guys was just saying, that laser is a very powerful tool, especially when you're arresting somebody and flex cuffing them. You can put the cover man can put that dot on the ground next to the guy's head while they're looking sideways. And they all know because they've probably at least seen one movie with a laser in it. But also for scaring people off from our front gate at night in our base, like cars would come creeping up on our base, and that we weren't issued the lasers that now they have. They have visible green lasers and some other modules like for the M4, but I was the only guy in the team that had any kind of laser that was visible. So I would go out and literally use that thing to scare people off that were creeping up on our facility at night. But I know for when you're doing arrest and cover contact type situations, that does get their attention, especially if you swirl it around on the ground next to them while they're being cuffed.
So after you listen to everybody's pros and cons there, obviously the cons outweighed the pros on this, and all valid reasons to why they needed to go to another platform for their issued pistols. John sent me a list here of the competitors that were in this MHS competition, and there were 12 pistols entered into the competition. Beretta entered their APX striker-fired pistol. Has anybody got any experience with the APX? I don't have any experience with it.
No, I've actually seen one.
I've seen it, but I've not actually shot it.
It's pretty slick. I haven't shot it. I haven't shot it yet, but
it's got some very aggressive serrations on it.
I just don't know. With it being so new, you don't know the quality of it or anything yet. It hasn't been battle tested, so to speak.
So the Czech Republic had the CZ P09. Belgium had the FN Herzl. They had a polymer frame striker fire pistol, apparently based on the FNS, and from which the FN 509 was developed. And then, of course, Glock had the 17 and the 22, chambered in 9mm, and the 40 Smith & Wesson. So they submitted, I guess, 2 different calibers. Chris USA, their Sphinx SDP. I've actually shot the Sphinx. It's chambered in 9mm NATO. Does anybody else have any experience with the Sphinx? No? Okay. And then Sig Sauer had the P320, and it's their modified version of the P320. And then Smith & Wesson, M&P, General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems, STI, and Detonics Defense, STX.
I'm surprised STI didn't get a good look, but I'm sure they did, just because of the competition shooters.
Yep.
Right. So,
Marty, I actually know the owners of Detonics.
Yeah, I was going to ask, has anybody got any familiarity with them? What are they about?
Yeah, what happens is you probably know Detonics died for years, and a couple of people from Illinois who are instructors bought the name, the Detonics brand. And I know when I started asking them about this, they were, these are my personal friends, and they were very tight-lipped. Long story short, I could certainly, now that this is over with, conceivably, I could probably ask them, if you like, what actually happened or what they thought about the contest, or the competition.
Yeah.
So, it's a small company. I wasn't sure how they were going to be able to tool up for a contract this big. When I saw their name on the list, actually a couple of these companies, I was wondering if they did get awarded, how they going to, produce that many pistols that fast to meet the military, 280,000 full size and 7,000 subcompacts.
Yeah.
In
well, that's another thing that should be in their consideration process is like, okay, you got Glock and Sig and Smith & Wesson who have been around for many years and have produced many thousands of firearms and have the capability of doing high volume. And then you look at a smaller company like the Detonics, is like, that would be a concern for me, whether they had the best gun or not, whether they would be able to ramp up their production to meet it. And if they did have to do so, what's going to happen to the quality at that point?
That's kind of like STI. There's so many competition shooters and stuff like that use STI. I mean, if they had to ramp up the production, would you get the same quality that you get now in their 2011 series firearms? Probably not.
Yeah.
So takes forever to get one now.
That would be a concern of mine, and I don't know that the government really looks at that or not, but I mean, it may be a consideration.
I can tell you from the manufacturing side and the government contract side, because that's something that we are definitely plugged into what we do.
Right, so you got some experience with that, yeah.
Right. So that is actually part of the contracting, is your capability statement. So when you put out there that you can do this, you also have to justify and quantify how you're going to do it and prove that. You can't just say, oh, we'll just ramp up. Okay, well, what are your capabilities for ramping up? They want to see that. You can't just make it up.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Also something that's glossed over a lot is how much of, when it comes to the larger manufacturers that are out there, how much they're actually making in-house versus what they're farming out. So if you think that they're making all of their own pins and springs and things like that, that's not always the case. So just keeping that in mind, that, you know, just because they are a large manufacturer doesn't mean that they make everything themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about the first.
Oh, sorry.
No, did you have something to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just to back up what Nathan said, when I worked at Smith & Wesson, I was an instructor, so I actually worked in a building about 2 miles away from where the factory was, but I was over there all the time, around a lot, and I was amazed seeing in that company as big as they used to be one of the 2 biggest handgun manufacturers, not only the capability they had to make a lot of pistols, which was my personal favorite. One of them was that Smith & Wesson would win this contract, just knowing that they could conceivably ramp up to produce a lot of product quickly. But the other thing I noticed there is, and of course, I had to sign a statement saying I wouldn't say with the names of them all, but you'd be surprised at how many other companies send their products, like some of their parts, to Smith & finishing, heat treatment, and so forth done, or they actually buy entire end items from them that have their name on it. You know, I'm talking rifle actions and everything. I mean, this is a pistol company. I'd walk through manufacturing and see all kinds of other stuff being built. You know, as you know, a lot of the AR-15s on the market now are parts guns, you know, built out of several other companies' parts.
Right.
That's something I've noticed getting deeper into the competition myself, and then shooting 3-gun. The deeper you dig, the more you find out that you didn't know about firearms and manufacturers.
Yeah, one thing I'd learned working at Smith and Sig is that, with the exception of Glock and maybe some other companies, most of them outsource their polymer frames.
Right.
You know, and I've actually stood there at receiving in Smith & Wesson and watched these giant bins full of what looked like plastic toys coming off, kind of rough and had burrs on them. And they, you know, of course, they put them through a process and before they even get near being assembled. But most of them do that now. I don't know for a fact what SIG's doing with the 320 military variant, but I do know that they buy these literally from plastics manufacturers that make this stuff, polymer, you know.
So that's good that they do take that into consideration as far as a company's capability. So that was, I was curious about that. So let's talk about the first phase, what's involved in the first phase of the MHS proposal. So the first phase was bid sample testing described in Section M of the RFP, which was to be conducted on all MHS proposals to identify which of them did not meet the basic requirements of the RFP and rank the proposals that were found to be in competitive range. Phase 1 consisted of only limited testing based on 9 factors, included test firing the pistols for accuracy solely in a ransom rest, and test firing the pistols only 12,500 rounds for reliability, and only 500 rounds for compact pistols, all in a test firing fixture. The only time the soldiers fired the MHS candidate pistols during the initial testing was to evaluate the ergonomic aspects of the pistols and complete a written survey of their opinions. Once this initial Phase 1 testing had been completed, up to 3 MHS proposals in the competitive range were to continue on to the sustainability, more comprehensive Phase 2 product verification testing and downselect evaluation based on 6 factors as required by Section H of the RFP. At the conclusion of the initial Phase 1 testing, proposals from Glock and Sig were the only 2 in the competitive range. So I guess was there 12 in all? So 10 of those flunked out of the Phase 1. It says both proposals were ranked essentially equal based on the limited testing of the technical factors evaluated during that phase, such as reliability and accuracy. The first phase of initial testing was not designed to identify which pistol would be able to perform best under the conditions soldiers would actually encounter in combat. The results of this initial testing were never intended to be the basis of which to select the actual pistol that would be adopted, and they are not sufficient for that purpose, which I wouldn't think so either. And that's what Phase 2 is supposed to get more into. And it's my understanding that these firearms never made it to Phase 2. So let's talk about Phase 2 real quick. Phase 2 of the testing required by the RFP was a comprehensive product verification testing and downselect evaluation based on 6 factors to be conducted on a competitive basis to determine which of the 2 MHS pistols in the competitive range was technically superior. The results of this crucial and universal small arms testing process is what the RFP intended to enable the source selection authority to make a fully informed decision regarding which MHS proposal was technically superior and should be adopted by the Army. Testing that was supposed to be done in a competitive basis during the second phase of the testing included system accuracy shooter in the loop, the only time in which the pistols were actually to be fired in soldiers' hands for purposes of measuring their accuracy. Reliability and service life testing was also to be conducted based on firing up to 35,000 rounds. Sustainability more than the limited number of rounds that had been fired with the pistols in a testing fixture to measure initial reliability during the limited first phase of testing. The RFP identified accuracy, reliability, and service life as the most important factors to be evaluated in the second phase. So, and it's my understanding again that the Glock and the Sig didn't make it to phase 2. Does anybody have any comments, any knowledge of that?
So So in phase 1, did they just do the decocker and safety and all that stuff that they were talking about doing?
Phase 1 was basically they just had it in a fixture,
a
machine, a machine that holds it, and they just ran 12,500 rounds through it.
So that would have been phase 2. Now,
phase 2 would have been the actual individual soldier or person using it, shooting up to 35,000 rounds through.
So that's the article that I read was the selection process, and they had a few things they were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But shortly after that is when it went black. I seen nothing else. It disappeared, and next thing you know, Sig's got the contract. So, anybody else got anything different?
Well, I know that's the part where they actually had it was 135 troops from all the different services had to fire it, because I think they even include the Coast Guard in this, believe it or not. But they all got a chance to. But I've taken part in that type of testing before, not with the handgun, but with other products. And you're pretty much sworn to silence when you take part in those, about especially how the process is done to make it fair on other manufacturers, because it can actually be considered procurement fraud, and they actually watch you for that. So my point is that from that point, I know those 135 troops plus probably hundreds of people involved in the testing. I know when years ago when they tried the first time around to adopt a new pistol, there were all kinds of people leaking out information, and industry folks and insiders and gun writers, and that really spoils the process and makes it unfair. Look what happened to Beretta. I don't know of anybody that was involved in picking that gun. It was picked for us.
That's
but
true.
It does appear to me that this was a lot more fair than before, at least.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree 100% with what you said, because you start leaking information, people are going to try to start going behind their backs and, hey, we need to make a correction here, we need to make a correction here. Well, the firearm that you submitted should have been good to begin with.
Yeah. So the information that I received, it says that the Army decides to prematurely award the MHS contract without completing testing. At the end of the limited initial testing conducted in Phase 1, the MHS proposals by Glock and Sig, the only two in the competitive range, had been ranked essentially equally based on limited testing of the technical factors evaluated during that phase. The proposal by Sig Sauer, however, was priced less than Glock's proposal. Pursuant to the requirements of the RFP, the Army was supposed to make an initial award to both Glock and Sig Sauer for a small number of pistols, accessories, and ammunition to be used for purposes of conducting the sustainability, more extensive and comprehensive Phase 2 testing required by Section 8 of the RFP. It would have cost the Army less than $250,000 to order the additional materials needed to complete the second phase of the testing on Glock's MHS proposal. Price was justifiable, intended to be least important factor in the selecting a new service pistol within the budget established by the Army for that purpose, according to the terms of the RFP. Nevertheless, based almost exclusively on the price difference between the MHS proposals by Glock and Sig Sauer, the Army decided to award the MHS contract to Sig Sauer without completing the second phase of the testing on a competitive basis to determine which proposal was technically superior. It should be noted that the RFP allowed each offerer to lower the price for their MHS proposals before the start of the second phase of the testing, and purportedly Glock never got that opportunity. So that's kind of what one source, that I'm reading, the information that I got here, did that actually happen? What was, I want to know why they did that. Why did they cut it off? Was there something about the Glock that that didn't meet their criteria at that point, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's going to be something hard to say unless anybody else got anything different.
Yeah, Glock, obviously we all know that Glock challenged this. They took it to appeals, and they were denied again. So, their appeal wasn't held up. And at this point, it looks like the Sig is moving forward. The P320 they're moving forward with the P320. So that seems to be the direction that they're going. So I don't know if Glock has any more appeals left or not, but it's my understanding that this is pretty typical that any government contract, you always got people appealing and protesting and whatnot. And so,
the appeals attorneys are an entire industry all to themselves.
Right.
Well, maybe Marty, if I get a chance, I mentioned you before the show, I might get a chance to go down to Picatinny Arsenal and visit the folks who, the program manager, soldier weapons, and the folks that, from RDEC, it's called, that oversee all this.
Yeah, yeah.
And I will certainly try to extract that information from them. Obviously they're going to have an official statement anyways about all of this. It's actually has to be publicly disclosed, per our contracting laws. But also, I know here's a key thing that maybe, and Glock probably knows this. Oh, thank you. Is the word downselect that you see being used?
Yes.
A downselect is a different type, and I know Nathan probably knows this very well. It's a very, very different process, because I took part in testing for downselects on our sniper night vision and some other products, where the Army and the DoD was allowed a lot of latitude, not to change the rules, but to expedite the adoption of something, especially in a time of war. But it's not a complete replacement, because the Beretta will probably remain in service for quite a while. So it's not a complete one-for-one swap of the guns. The downselect allows you to add to the existing national stock numbered end item, in this case a pistol. So you're going to see a lot of Berettas around for a long time. It's not like 280,000 plus 7,000 are going to instantly appear and end up in holsters in the Army and other joint services. And this contract could go far beyond the scope, because look what happened with the M9. The Army adopted the M9 years ago, and then all these other people started getting it as well. So there could be second and third order follow-on contracts. But I do know that the downselect process, I don't know all in the weeds specifics, but I took part in it as a tester and in some conferences with SOCOM, and I know that it is a different process in order to get a new product into the troops' hands faster.
Yeah.
Right. And when you start talking about how or when this eventually becomes a program of record, because right now, we're just talking about the selection process. This isn't actually a program of record contract, such as like the M4 or M1 Abrams or things like that. So once it goes into that long-standing, congressionally approved, budgeted platform that they decide on, as John was saying, it can definitely turn into different layers that fall under that program. So when we talked about all the different pistol platforms that are in the military across all the different branches, the SIGs and the Glocks and the Berettas and things like that, down the road, as the Berettas are not going away anytime soon, there will be phases in and phases out and different additions to contracting. As you see right now, just because the Army has something doesn't mean everyone in the Army has that. Just because someone in the Marines has an M9 doesn't mean the MEU or MARSOC is carrying something else. They make those selections based on their requirements.
Exactly.
Well, I think a major turning point will occur in terms of seeing who else adopts it, and also how far the Army goes, because is later this year, actually we're just about to enter into that fiscal quarter, but supposedly the next step was the Army is going to give it a limited issue of the XM17 to some line units. And I know there's an infantry unit, I believe, that was specified, and they're going to do what's called initial operational testing. So obviously all kinds of feedback's going to come out of that, because as you guys know, these line troops are going to beat the crap out of these guns and have plenty to say. But what I'm thinking or guessing is that the other services and other units in the military, to include special forces and so forth, and the units that have some latitude to try other product lines, they're going to be looking at that to see what the feedback is now that it's out of the hands of the R&D people.
Well, I think 101st Airborne got the first run of them, right?
Yeah, but here's my point.
I wasn't going to mention it, but that's the word I got.
Here's my point, though, is that this is the P320 is a relatively new firearm. It's only been around for, 3 years maybe?
That designation, yes, but the technology that built the 320 comes from predecessors.
But the Glock's been around for, 30 years? Pretty well tested. If they didn't put it through these, the phase 2 tests, then how do they know, without a shadow of doubt? And I'm not saying that the P320 is not, a worthy gun, but without putting it through those tests and then comparing it side by side with another firearm, whether it's the Glock or the Smith & Wesson or, whatever it may be, how do they know for sure without doing that? Why are they just picking the P320 and skipping, that phase 2 process?
Well, I know one advantage. I've been studying the specs on all these competitors, and I think the one thing that SIG has got a one-up on all these guys is the 3 different size interchangeable grip modules, which 2 of them are in the RFP.
But all they're doing is changing out the trigger housing assembly. You take out the trigger housing and you put it in one of the smaller ones. Glock, you can just change out a barrel, and you can get, a different caliber,
Right, but you're also dealing with the entire spectrum of people in the military. So there's all different kinds of hand shapes and sizes, and that's what the military is also looking at. It's not just the caliber change, it's also the modularity for the shooter.
But the Glock has the different back straps now too, don't they, on the Gen 4s?
Gen 4s. But
honestly, if you compare this, this gives 2 advantages to SIG over all these other companies, because you're pretty much stuck with that frame, whether it's a Smith or a Glock or an FN. But with this one, the Army could come around later and tell SIG they need different shapes and sizes of that frame that we did not see now. I'm looking at their website now, but they have the latitude and to change out that polymer, that design is not too difficult of a process, but it gives SIG and the Army the capability to change this thing as we go, to meet specific needs, particularly with that light mount or any number of things. And the trigger module, I know that thing looks almost exactly like not exactly, but similar to what the SIG Pro pistol, from 15 years ago. That was a big selling point that for armors, you go to like a half-day armors course for that pistol, because you could pull that whole module out and you could put a DAO, you could put a double single, you could even set up potentially a single action only pistol out of this gun. And that's the one thing that at least the Army did put on this gun, is that it's got a manual safety lever on the frame, which is the one thing different than what most of the civilian variants have on this gun. So I think it puts SIG and the Army in a position to change and modify this gun, whereas with the Beretta, there's almost nothing you could do to that gun once they got it.
Yeah. Right, and one of the things to consider, too, is just because we're fighting primarily in the Middle East right now doesn't mean that we won't find ourselves in the Arctic, where people are wearing big mittens, and that's not something that you're going to be able to slip into a Glock frame that easily, and definitely not going to be able to retrofit to.
It's going to be the same size no matter what frame they go to.
It depends on how modular they make it.
Well, again, they haven't made it, so how can they base their judgment on that yet?
Well, they're also looking down the road. That's part of what all of this testing goes into, is not what we're doing necessarily right now, but they have to look long term. They have to figure out the life cycle management of this platform and what it's going to look like 20 years down the road, or whatever that service life ends up being. I think it was 10 for this MHS.
Not only that, just the cost of
it's 10 years, for the gun, and 5 years for the ammo.
The cost of the modularity.
That's only what's written into this. That's not if they decide to extend.
Right, they can always extend if they wanted to.
And also the cost of the modularity part.
It's the government. They can do whatever the hell they want to.
I think Glock, if they end up not getting any traction with this, they're going to get their crack in 5 or 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Well, again,
they've proven
everybody's going to be watching this.
They've proven themselves in other arenas with several highway patrols nationwide. Even the Philippine National Police just awarded Glock with their, their contract over in the Philippines, which it's my understanding that the test that they put their guns through there is more rigorous than the United States government, which apparently our government didn't put it through any kind of testing other than an armrest.
Well, I don't know. You got to remember, Marty, the Glock's been used.
And I'm not just saying just the Glock. I'm talking about the other guns that were in the contest as well.
It's just that wasn't widely talked about just due to mission, mission
Hey, Marty,
stuff.
how do you think we ended up with a Beretta in the first place?
Cost is the cheapest one.
And what was listed as the least
Cost.
important factor?
Cost.
There you go.
But
Okay.
that's the thing,
So now
you
you're
know, if
starting
they're
to
going to
see how
say,
things work out.
yeah, if cost is the least important. But again, as we were talking about earlier, that Beretta probably in the long run ended up costing more because of all the issues and the problems that they had with it. And then when you're talking about all these different components and modularity of this P320, that's a lot of additional accessories there that you're talking about. To do that. Those frames aren't just because it's got a frame that you can drop that trigger in. You think they're gonna just drop another trigger into that? No, they're gonna buy a whole nother gun that's already got the trigger in it. That's our government. That's how they work.
Well, yes and no.
Yes.
I mean, because I work in supply and logistics also, and I kind of know how that works too. So, it's just,
And if you're talking about aftermarket components, then I don't think we should be talking about Glock because you might get your feelings hurt there.
What are you talking about? They got the most aftermarket components of anybody. And plus, Nate, when you stipple, you can change that grip however you want to, baby.
There's a video about that.
When you get into Dremels and stippling, oh my gosh.
Well, I was also impressed by buried deep in the contract, in the RFP rather, and in the contract, but is the amount of authorized items and components that have to come with the pistol, and also what the pistol is required. What I'm referring to is that there's actually a designated holster and mag pouch. The Safariland ALS, which I was issued a version of, and I think it's fantastic. Honestly, it's frankly the holster that the rest of the industry seems to chase for retention holsters. It's the I don't want to mention other companies, but a lot of them did try to steal that intellectual property and make their own version. But there's a long list in here of other items that are part of the they call it a system component package, and then of course there's the suppressor provision for this contract, and apparently the suppressor has to be able to work on the compact and the full size. There's a whole list of stuff that goes with that nobody ever even thought of when we got the Beretta. They thought ahead on this one. They looked at what the military was asking for, and looking down this list, I can see almost everything that they're going to want is actually going to be what's called an AAI, or additional authorized item, like when you get issued the gun, whether it's a cleaning kit or more magazines or what have you. It's all listed here, and they even have grip inserts for the ransom rest, so people can actually put these things on a rest and check the sights and zero the sights.
I think there's a required podcast that they have to listen to with that also. I think Talking Lead.
Talking Lead, I think.
It's in there. Sure it was written in there somewhere, yeah.
But you know what, though? I mean, and a good point like you brought up earlier is also, like, look at the M4s for modularity, as you was talking about. Watching the transition, like us in 2004 and 5, being a scout unit attached to 3rd Infantry Division, it was kind of one of those things. We had all the good gear, the IR lasers, all the NVGs, all that type of stuff. Back then it was like the PAC-2s. I know that's like ancient Stone Age now. But, we had all that stuff. And when other units would see us, man, y'all got all that cool stuff and everything like that, there's the modularity you're talking about. It's all based on mission needs and capabilities and what you're going to be doing in the field. And that type of modularity, looking ahead is something they learned from, I think, in previous battles and combat.
So I think something that John touched on right there with the AAI, the additional authorized items, when they've gone through and they've put together an RFP package like they did with that much forward thought, there's also a lot of things behind the scenes that most people don't even know about, such as the writing of the field manuals and the technical manuals. TACOM is pretty well backlogged on trying to catch up to all the new technology that's been fielded already. A lot of times you'll find that units are out there with nothing more than an owner's manual from the manufacturer. So they've been playing catch up for a while. So when you look at this RFP, the way that it's written, a lot of that stuff is in the format that TACOM, which is the Tank, Automotive, and Armament Command, up over everything that has anything to do with equipment over the military, well, at least on the Army side. They have requirements for how they write those technical manuals and field manuals. So I think they've done a lot of the homework on getting this RFP written in the format that is going to save time on the other side, which is the writing and the technical aspects of it that most people never even see.
Right. And there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, especially when you start dealing even with TRADOC, dealing the teaching and stuff like that. I mean, you can dig deep, even into the training of soldiers. You got to look I shouldn't say this, but sometimes you got to look back on, almost a third grade level to kind of, I shouldn't be saying that, I guess, but, to train every soldier. I mean, not everybody is going to be special forces or any of that stuff. So they got to have, TMs and 23MPs and everything else that you can get into and be able to facilitate that with that firearm.
Well, here's a prediction for you, Marty, because I've been talking to troops and talking to people who are former troops, instructors, and a lot of people, more like end user feedback versus, some of our brethren in the gun industry and other places, not the present company included, but I mean, folks that have been end users of the pistol in the past in the military. And this is what I predict is this. I think when guys start getting this new pistol in their hands, for one, their morale probably will go up a little bit. It's a pistol that more troops had more say in the process versus, I know about 12 years ago, they had the Joint Combat Pistol, which was the first attempt to replace the Beretta.
Yeah.
And that whole thing just disintegrated and went south, and it was ridden with bureaucracy and problems. So this is actually an improvement on the last two times the military tried to get a new pistol. But at least I think their morale will go up, and you're probably going to see more troops starting to buy versions of the P320 of their own. They're probably going to go out and practice more on their own, because this is a gun you can buy in just about any state, and it's not going to be that expensive. I mean, if you look at the prices on SIG's website, they're obviously kind of high, but they're going to be able to get variations. In fact, I'm hoping that SIG offers maybe a special purchase for veterans and active duty troops, because that'll get this thing more into circulation, just like the 1911. People were proud of that gun and proud to have it. So, going back to World War II vets that still own them. But but I also think that this process and the actual pistol pick may not make everybody happy. I'm actually reading from one of my article drafts on this, but it's the one gun I think that's come along in history that at least gives us a chance to change it. With its modularity, it's got 5 different things about this gun that we can change if need be. Whereas with the Beretta, there was maybe one other than the grips, and that was you could change the barrel. Nothing.
Do you have the 5 things listed there?
Well, the barrel, for one, which the SIG is going to have to comply with that anyways, and they've already tested and produced these, but the threaded barrel that will work with the suppressor and with all the ammunition that's required, which is a testing process in itself. I could send you the whole list, but the slide they can change out, they have 3 different
just
size
the basics, yeah. So the triggers, the barrels, the slides, what else can they change out? Sights, obviously.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, the sights are very easy. And in the contract or in the RFP, it specifies that any suppressor that SIG develops to go with the pistol, if it requires sights to be able to see over the top of the thing, then SIG has to supply those, which is no problem for SIG because they've been dealing with sights for many years.
Sure.
And from having had to bench rest and zero numerous, when I worked in Homeland Security, we bench rested on a ransom rest every single gun several times a year because of our operational needs to be able to get a long shot and so forth. I could say they're pretty darn easy guns to zero and that hold to zero pretty well. With the way their newer slides are built, they're a very reliable gun for switching parts out on and still having them function. As many people know, when SIG came out with the 357 SIG, you could literally just convert from 40 to 357 with a barrel swap. And if anything, this gun is going to have all those advantages, if not more, because there's parts of almost every gun that SIG's built incorporated into this gun. It's like it's all their lessons learned.
But you know what they can't do with it, John?
What's that?
They can't put it into a micro-roni.
We're going to have to call Mikey Hartman.
There's a whole nother level of modularity they've not even thought about, turning their handgun into a subgun, submachine gun.
There's a whole radio show right there.
I'm telling you, man. Lethality and accuracy, you just, quadrupled. So
can you imagine having a micro-roni with a SIG P320 or a Mark 17 with suppressor on it?
Oh, Mikey's going to make one now compatible for the P320.
If they do that, I will be getting one for sure.
He's going to. He has to. There's money to be made there. Mikey's going to jump all over that. And speaking of Mikey, you're talking about the implementation of the P320. You remember that class that we took with him, and they were talking about how, when he was implementing the Tavor with the Israeli Defense Forces, they were doing it with just the new troops that were coming in. The old guys didn't get them because they didn't want to have to spend the time and the effort to try to retrain an old dog new tricks, So do you think our military is gonna do it that way?
Well, I know at least with the Israelis, I think you might have remembered to explain it, that each brigade in the IDF has a different rifle. and it's almost like a territorial thing to them. That's why they have so many different rifles in that military, Gliels, the Tavor, and ARs and so forth. But yeah, I think here's the thing: our military is a lot bigger. We got a lot more money, and also we got the Congress behind this. So if anybody's got any complaints about this gun, it honestly, especially now with social media and people contacting elected officials or leaking things, word will get out on all of this. And I think in the end run, it's going to be better for the troops. That's really, since I began whining about this pistol in the early 90s, that's really all I cared about. That's why I wrote to the Army and complained about it. It used to be called the JSAP program, but now it's the Program Soldier Weapons. And then I wrote to Smith & Wesson and asked them, why didn't you guys win the pistol contract? I'm disappointed. But, I'm a happy camper now because we're a lot better off than we were before.
Right.
So.
Well, and you made a comment also about, wouldn't it have been better if they had picked American-made firearm? Well,
my personal bias, and having worked for one of the American companies, Smith & Wesson, I would have loved to see an enhanced version of the M&P be this pistol, but the one advantage Sig's got is those interchangeable grip modules. You can change the whole bottom half of the gun out. But yeah, I would have rather seen Sig or Smith & Wesson, Smith & Wesson or Ruger, partly because just knowing from the inside that those two companies are huge and could tool up to quickly crank these guns out, where a lot of these other companies, I don't know if you've ever walked around some of them, but they're pretty darn small, especially now that they've gone to CNC machining. They are, square footage-wise, factories, it's shocking to people when they visit.
I didn't think Ruger was in the running, were they? They weren't even one of the 12, were they?
No, but in honesty, I checked out the Ruger, the All-American that they came out with, and I personally like it. I know people start shooting arrows at me for saying that, but I'm just thinking of what a troop needs and wants. Yep. That's the only thing I care about. I worked for two different gun companies, and I don't have blind loyalty to either one of the two. And when I was instructor, we had to be impartial because we had to teach every type of gun. We had to know the system of operation and the best possible technique on any gun, no matter what. Because you get a cop. If he's issued that messed up Beretta, you can't say that's a messed up gun. You can't send a guy back to duty thinking that. You got to build their confidence in their equipment. So there's a way to, for lack of a better term, there's a way to trick anybody into being able to shoot just about any gun well, right? But why should we put that on our troops? Why not give them a gun that's easy to shoot and it's always going to work? And then, as one of our fellow interviewees here said, it's got to be modular. So let the troop decide how they're going to configure the gun for the mission. So I'm more happy than anything, So I work for Sig. It's nice to see them win, but there's about 8 different manufacturers I think would have been great for this. Yeah,
but when you say modular, I mean the Glock's one of the most modular handguns there is on the market today.
Right.
So I mean, it's got different aspects of modularity versus the modularity that you're talking about that the P320 has.
But the 320 has 2 distinct advantages over any Glock, and that's the interchangeable grips. You completely can change the design of the lower half of the gun if needed. There's already 3 available, and the Army, I think, is buying 2.
But what's the difference? What's the difference? Is it the thickness? Is it what's the difference in the grip?
Frame. You can change the entire frame out.
So you can go from a full size to a mid size to a subcompact. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and the difference is the length of the actual dust cover on the, Sig calls it an interchangeable grip module, but the dust covers on the large, medium, and small are all different lengths, and the grips are different length as well. You can still use the full-size mags in the compact or small grip module, but there's a little extender like you see on a lot of guns.
When they issue this, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when they issue this P320, is everybody going to get all of those components? Each person?
Yeah, most of the troops are going to get the full-size grip. They're going to have the ability to switch to the smaller grip if they need it, right? Then Sig is going to issue a certain smaller quantity, I think it's 7,000 or 8,000, of just the compact, which is the shorter slide, the shorter barrel, and the smaller grip module. But again, you can
by themselves, or they're just issuing the full size with that modular piece.
Now, the way I read it is that the full size, they'll have the ability to modularly change some of these components out, and with or without a suppressor. And then there's going to be the separate compact, of which there's only about 7,000 going to be issued, and maybe more, who knows, for like CID and counterintelligence and so forth. And also for troops that have smaller hands, like women and a lot of people who never had this opportunity before. I've seen female troops that literally could not get their index finger all the way onto the trigger of the Beretta previously.
Yeah.
But this newer module has a shorter trigger web distance, from the web of your hand to the shoe of the trigger. So this automatically is an advantage because And not to mention that the Army.
But how's that different than issuing them a Glock 19 or a Glock 23?
Because on the Glock you have removable inserts that go into the existing frame. In this case, you can change the entire frame in one and without tools.
But what you're saying is they're just going to automatically be issued that size or that frame.
Right, but they'll have the ability to use the other sizes if they need to. Like, for instance, if their hand doesn't fit the gun, which is prevalent, I think, in many cases. This is an easier to reach trigger than the Beretta.
I guess it's hard for me to comprehend this because I've not seen, I guess, the frames for the P320. So I would need to see those.
You're going to be the first to see the results of all this. But
okay.
I mean, it's been written about widely. But just to answer your question, the other part of it is,
I'm just saying Glock's got 3 different sizes of handguns right now. So I mean, what's not modular about that? And then the ability to change out a barrel to get a different caliber. You can change out different magazines to get different.
This one actually.
You can change out back straps to get different grips.
This gives you a lot more interchangeability by far, and the other half of that is the trigger group, which they call a striker-fired interchangeable trigger group. You know, the one the Army's buying, you know, which is the same. You know, it's a double action only, basically, or a version of that.
Mm-hmm.
But with it's a DAO with a manual safety, which is odd, but that's what the military wants, and I can see there's some reasons for having that.
Yeah.
And it's this is the first time the military, for a general purpose pistol, is purchased a striker fired gun.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the other that you're talking about is you can change guns, but you're talking about a different model number. So when you talk about going from a Glock 19 to one of the other models, just because the grip is different, it's a completely different gun. But the Sig is going to be the same model no matter what grip you put on it.
Right. And with this trigger group, you know, the Army's buying what they spec, but this also gives the troops the capability. If some units do want a single action only pistol, where they, which that could be done, because I've seen that done when they had an earlier pistol that Sig built. But this allows them also. This is one of the first military pistols ever. You don't need tools to work on this gun. You don't even need a screwdriver now, because you don't need a screwdriver to take the grips off like the previous 2 models, 1911 M9. But you can take this whole gun apart and put it back together, minus the sights, without any tools, and that's a good thing, I think. And if something goes wrong with the trigger group or with the frame, like say the frame gets a little bit melted, you know, if your grip got crushed or something on a Beretta, or you know, some kind of damage like a vehicle rollover or something, the gun is gone. With this thing, you can replace the part without tools, and they can do that in the field. So this is going to dramatically simplify.
You can do that with a Glock too.
Right, but you can't interchange trigger groups on the Glock, and you got to use tools to do it.
I got to see it, I guess. I have to physically see it.
When you slide off the gun, you can literally, with one motion, take the entire trigger mechanism out of the gun in one piece. All the pieces come out, the trigger and everything. The only thing that's left down in there that you can mess with is the magazine release. So from an armor's, I've been to the Sig Armor School like 3 times. I used to have to go through it like once a year when I worked there. And those guns are pretty simple as it is, just like the Glock.
Yeah.
But this is even simpler than anything I've ever seen.
More cost effective.
Well, time will tell whether it's more cost effective or not. We'll see.
Well, yeah, there you go, because we don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
True.
So, again, you know, I think the fact that they didn't put it through the full test, you know, kind of makes me skeptical. Now, I got nothing against Sig. I like Sigs. You know, I've got a P226. I love it. I like the M11 A1s. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, M11 A1.
Yeah.
Those are sweet pistols.
Yeah, I love those too. They're 1911s that they have. You know, I like, you know, they're 45s.
The Michelles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Max Michelle.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not busting on Sig at all. I want to make sure that our troops are getting, you know, a reliable, good gun. You know, something that's going to be battle tested, battle worn, hold up, you know, when their life depends on it, when our lives depend on it. And like you said, you know, it's a morale thing too. I think just the fact that they're getting a whole new gun platform, I don't think it mattered which gun they picked. You know, I think everybody would have been excited about it in our military. I think morale would have gone up no matter what.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see how this turns out. I want it to work. You know, now that they've picked it, you know, I'm going to get behind it 100% and, you know, help them out. But at the same time, you know, if there's still a chance that they can get a Glock in there, I'm a Glock guy, obviously.
Well, let me put it another way. All right. Let me put it another way. I worked there for 3 years, and I made it a point to issue myself one of every SIG that SIG made at the time, in every caliber and every type. And I also had to teach right hand and left hand. But during the 3 years, I went through every different model and variation of every model that SIG had, every caliber. It's about 30 guns. And I would holster up, and like for a week at a time or 2 weeks, I would teach with and use those. And I personally feel this P320 military variant, I would pick that over anything that I taught with. And I've got some favorites, and I got my favorite calibers and stuff, but I actually like this gun for a number of reasons better, especially not just in general for like concealed carry or for cops, but especially for military purposes, having been a former troop. Yeah. And it does something.
Well, I know how thorough and meticulous you are, and if you say it's a good gun, then I obviously would take your word for it. But I still gotta get some hands on with it, with this modularity. I'm not sold on the modularity benefit. Other than the trigger, I can see the benefit of the trigger. All one piece, pop it out, pop it in. But as far as the grips that you're talking about, the different frames, I'm not seeing that yet. So I gotta get sold on that part.
Hey, John,
I'm sorry.
I haven't had a 320 in my hands. I've only seen the pictures of them. Does that come with a manual safety, external safety?
The military version does, yes.
Okay, and I think that's also going to be a major player with how I understand the military's safety program. That I'm not in love with an external manual safety personally, but I know the military, that's where they lean most of the time, and that's what I saw with a lot of the Glocks that were fielded overseas. That the military, specifically the Army, big Army, generally frowned on pistols that did not have an external manual safety.
Yeah, they believe in that safety for sure.
Here's your external safety right here.
Here's the good news.
If you look works in Hollywood.
Yeah, it does.
But if you look at the safety on the model, the tan ones that the Army tested, it's a good ergonomic design. It fits very close to the gun and is snag free. And it's really, for all practical purposes, it's out of the way. I know that for a fact that a lot of troops, because it's basically a DAO type action, they're not even they'll probably have the safety down all the time. A lot of units will. They're not going to, because that, as you guys know, that's a training issue right there. Is just like with a 1911 or a Browning high power, is knowing when you draw that thing from the holster at one point, you got to, actuate the safety. So that's a training issue there that could screw people up. But I think a lot of units are going to just keep that safety lever down, a lot of soft units and so forth. It's not even an issue. I could see why, and I know of certain situations that you would want a safety maybe.
I'm thinking about the part of the military that runs around in PT belts.
Yes.
That's exactly it right there, the PT belt mentality.
Right. So I'm thinking of all the thousands and thousands of aftermarket accessories that there are for a Glock. I've never seen
What do we talk about? We're keeping that on the DL because we're going to go into manufacturing on that one as soon as we get the patents.
Did you patent that yet? Did you go ahead and trademark that for us?
And I've been so busy.
Okay. I'll edit that out. All right. So
Marty, the other part that you were talking about, you mentioned how long it's going to take for this pistol to get
implemented
into, and it's not going to be a 1-for-1 swap with all the M9s. Think about the M16A2. There are still units that are using the M16A2.
Right.
Even though we've switched long ago over to the M4, they're still in use, and I would be willing to bet that there will still be 1911s and M9s that are going to still be in the system somewhere, whether it's in the reserves or some other type of component, and still be using that weapon. It's like you said, it's not going to be a 1-for-1 swap. So initially, it's going to be those.
It'll take time.
Those small units that are begging for this pistol, and then eventually it's going to spread throughout the rest of the services.
And realistically, you've got the M2 heavy-barreled machine gun that's seen service since it was fielded in 1921.
Oh yeah.
To the point where we pulled it off of aircraft in the 50s and turned them into ground-mounted versions. We're still running around with the 1911 45 pistols. So,
because we have the best armorers in the world.
Well, I mean, we're talking 100-year-old designs, 150-year-old designs that are still
working,
in service.
Yeah.
So, as far as programs go, I don't see this being an overnight change, and I don't see it being to scale right out the gate.
It took a while to get the non-headspace and time and M2s out. Finally.
I know when I know back in the 80s when we were switching over the M16A2, I was in active duty in the infantry in one of the lowest priority units in the Army. We had A2s around 1988. I went in the National Guard that year in a Special Forces unit, and we had the A1s. You would think we'd have the newer thing, but it took a long time to get those. At one point, we had A1s, A2s, and M4 A1s and M4s. We had 4 different rifles circulating around combat arms in the Army there.
Right. And coming from that same mentality, I went through, I think, 3 uniform changes when I came in, or by the time I got out. And when I first came in, we still had, and this was a training unit, so it wasn't Army-wide, but we still had M60 machine guns. We had chocolate chip, uniforms, the DCUs with the brown marks on them. And we also had Pricks PRC-77 radios when, everyone else was getting Singar's radios. So that gives you an idea that just because, and this is in the Army, this isn't, hand-me-downs to the Marine Corps because the Army's done with it yet. We still have this, and this was active duty. This wasn't even National Guard or Reserve.
Right. Well, one thing I know that is different now, I got to see this. I actually ended up in Afghanistan less than a year from 9/11. So I was there for the first anniversary, and then again on the 10th anniversary. And I was always keeping track of the gear and what units got what and how fast. But something that changed since 9/11, they have this thing called Rapid Fielding Initiative, which means
RFI.
whoever's going into the box, into the war zone, is like first in line to get anything that's new. So whether it was the new Mitch helmets, the Camelbacks, the M240 machine gun, they would actually push those units I actually took part in a selection process for that, representing my unit, where we got to nominate the products. But, the EOTech, all this stuff, and they have been a lot better, the Army Material Command and all these different commands that buy all this stuff, they've been a lot better about making sure these units get whatever's the latest and greatest, the night vision, it's actually been a revolution in our military.
Body armor.
Yeah, I was part of the Interceptor body armor part of the RFI, so I know exactly what you're talking about and how that worked out.
Them old IBAs. Oh.
So perhaps with this pistol contract, we'll see more rapid fielding, to meet the troops' needs. We've got less troops now by far overseas than we did in like 2007 and so forth, or at the height of the war. I think when the last time I was in Afghanistan, we had, it was right before the downsizing, we had 101,000 U.S. and about 50,000 NATO. But now we're, I think, down around 10,000 or something. So, you got less troops over in the box. But either way, they've gotten this down to a science now, being able to get this new equipment out pretty quickly.
And as far as it comes down to why they didn't initiate the second phase or the further testing, a lot of this stuff has gotten to be such a science that just because what you see on the table isn't all that is going on. So a lot of that testing requirement could have been done in other fashions outside of this MHS.
Well, again, it could have been, and we're just speculating at this point. So I don't.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know. So I would like to get some more information, and maybe as John was talking about, he's gonna be going to some of these manufacturers and see them in person and interview them. Maybe we could do a follow up and see what you discover.
Yeah. Also, if we could, if you'd like, we could put the word out by social media before that trip. Solicit from, gun media guys and troops what questions they want asked that we could get answered on the show next time.
Okay. Yeah.
And we live in the technology world now where they're not going to be able to hide corruption in the process for the selection,
right,
like they used to be able to as well. So, the days of $20,000 hammers and $30,000 toilet seats and nobody knows about it, that's gone quite a ways away from what we have now when it comes to the procurement process.
Yeah.
Okay. So do we, any final thoughts? Was there anything else that we needed to hit on? I think we hit the major things. I think we just left more questions than we answered, but does anybody have anything else that they wanted to cover to make sure that we got out there?
I think the military could do much worse than what they're already considering with the 320 series.
That's a fact.
There's a lot of really bad choices we could have made, but I think they crossed enough T's and dotted enough I's to at least make sure that our troops in LE are getting a very good pistol.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so I have my top 10 list, Marty.
Your top 10 list?
I got a top 10 list of things that we should look ahead for with this pistol contract.
Okay, so let's do that. So looking forward, we'll start with you. What do we need to be looking for?
Number one is once the first order of the pistols that are delivered to the units, that's supposed to happen in this fiscal quarter that we're going into, which ends October 1. So supposedly some infantry and other units are going to accept delivery and start shooting and testing. It's basically where they go to the range, but they're going to have military procurement people with them during this next phase. And I think we'll be watching that and also making sure, to see that SIG does get this right and can tool up and produce this large number of pistols in the time frame that they're required to. The second thing is it'll be curious to see, this is the first striker-fired gun as a general issue in the military. I mean, the Glock's out there in a few units, like Army Special Forces has a few. But this will be the first time to see a striker-fire gun in uniformed troops' hands, widespread, especially going to this type of combat zone, not a hammer-fired gun. And to see what, as you guys know, striker-fired guns have had a history with light hits and other issues that can happen. Not saying that there would be any problem with SIG. The other thing we're going to see is an explosion of both government off-the-shelf, commercial off-the-shelf, and aftermarket orders by units for all the stuff the contract doesn't include, which at least this one includes things like holsters and other gear. But these guys are obviously going to be authorized, like they have been since 9/11, to start ordering more. So there's going to be a lot of business for companies to equip these 580,000 or 280,000 pistols as well as the Army buying more of what they need. We're also going to see feedback from the troops on the gun, and I've already got my people planted out there that I'm asking to tell me the truth. We may see some changes with the gun, whether the Army decrees it and tells SIG, or SIG may come up with some improvements. Also, a big one is the suppressors and how that's going to roll out and who's going to get them and how those work and how SIG does with that, because that's a newer part of their product lines. You're going to see other services maybe ordering it, and also other, the big thing that SIG and others benefit from, and Glock does especially, is foreign military sales. Anytime you get a national stock number on something, several different organizations in our government facilitate sales to other countries, from U.S. manufacturers. So you may see a lot of other countries or police forces ordering it because of the success or not in our military. The other thing is you may see an effect on the rest of the market too. Whether it's people buying personal purchase because, hey, I got the Army gun, the Mark 17.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. That's one of the biggest reasons why these companies want to get the government contracts, because they bid them so low to begin with. They know that the civilian market is really their big target.
I know the second that people found out the 320 was going to be the military's pistol, or the Army's pistol, so to speak, the sales went crazy on the 320.
And look at if you look at SIG's website, they've got all these other versions now for competition and with all kinds of stuff on it.
Which I would love to get my hands on to try, by the way.
Those are, but I also think too, my prediction, I don't know if it'll happen or not, but you may see the military or the troops saying they want some differences, specs on those grip modules, which is a lot easier to change than changing an aluminum or steel frame on a gun, as Nathan, I know, who's a manufacturer, knows. But that you may see that down the road. They may want something different with those grips.
They're going to want easy enough. They're going to want one that says Glock on it.
I knew they say that. The other one is they're going to have an armor's course just for this gun
to show how they can put it in a Glock.
For gun media guys to go to.
Yeah, that'd be
SIG
cool.
That's one of the best things I'll tell you from having worked there that SIG does is their armor's course. I know people that went to it as well as H&K's just to see how an armor's course is run. They used to send us to these in the military, not so much to learn just that product line, but to see how, what they recommend for processes. And the last prediction, number 10, is maybe, and I'm going to suggest it to SIG anyways, my contact that I've been supplied with there, they really need to offer a discount program for this pistol so vets, troops, and anybody else that, they got a reason for it, can get this gun at a decent price, because that will be money in the bank for them if it is a successful pistol to keep this thing in the system.
Well, I thought they already had that in place, though.
On that thought, John, I would actually add 3 tips or advice for SIG. And I'm just a guy, so they can take it or leave it. But the first thing I would do is, on that note, offer or tool up to be able to offer a custom version of that and put out special editions of that gun. You'll see that a lot with military units, that they will have a 1st Infantry Division version of that, or a 2nd MARSOC, or I don't even know the military units, but they'll have special versions of the gun, and they'll have engravings and gold plated triggers and all kinds of crazy stuff. They did that with the 1911s. They did that with the M9 Berettas, and that is a huge secondary market that they can tap into. And then 2 other points of advice. One would be to ramp up their factory certification armors courses that you were talking about, because on the other side of the house, not just DOD, but you have Department of State contracts that require that for their armors that go over on WPS and DAV contracts, to where they have to have factory certifications for those. And then, the last point that I would make to that is they should really, really, really reconsider their model number, because the military already has an M320 and it's a grenade launcher. So that's going to be a point of confusion for the military, because if you don't keep it simple for them out the gate, then things get crazy later on.
What's going to be the M17?
If they go with that designation, right? I'm seeing everybody and their mother, depending on who's writing the story, with different information. So I want to make sure that that's...
Yeah, I agree. I think that SIG, to simplify it on their website, it should just say M17, or something like that, or P17.
It's the XM17 program, but that doesn't necessarily mean what it's going to be accepted in, kind of like what we saw with the F-23 and F-22s that were going through their testing. And I know that was based on the selection of which one they chose.
Well, I know definitely with the pistol coming in, I definitely want to use my GI Bill to go to their armor's course to kind of get more knowledge of the firearm myself. So
yeah. So, Ken.
Yes, sir.
Any final thoughts?
I think you guys covered pretty much all of it. And as far as the old guy of the group, I have never used a striker fire pistol, so I can't even speak to that.
Nate, you got to correct him on that.
Interesting for me to be able to test out something along that lines, or even get one of my own if I enjoy shooting something like that. I mean, I carry a Smith & Wesson 45, so I carry that because that's what I'm comfortable with. But that doesn't mean that I won't be comfortable with something like this.
We upgraded him from a single action Peacemaker last year.
Casey, any final thoughts?
No, I'm just glad to see a good change.
Okay, all right. And guys, just because the military is adopting this firearm doesn't mean you can't still go out and buy a Glock. So
I have Glocks. I'm not gonna not shoot my Glocks.
And that's what my other pistol is a P38. So
that's what I shoot in competition, unless this new Sig is kind of cool. So kind of excited to see that.
Yeah. All right. So I think we covered a whole lot in this episode. We're knocking on 2 hours here, so we might have information overload for our lead heads, but I think it was all very good information, very constructive. Other than me, I think I might have been showed a little bias, didn't I? Didn't mean to.
I hope you do the same thing when we're talking about AR-15s with your AR-15 manufacturing sponsor.
You know I will. So, real quick, let's talk about how everybody can get in touch with everybody here. So, John, how can people get in touch with you? Talk about everything you got going on real quick.
I will post a link that connects with your page, but I'm on Twitter. It's at JTF Peterson, all lowercase. Same as on Instagram, same as all my social media, but I'm definitely on Facebook under my full name. It's John Milton Peterson, and it's got my ugly bug on there. But like I said, I'll connect onto your Facebook. So
okay, sounds good. Nate, everybody knows Frontier Tactical. Go ahead.
I'd like to get the questions that people want to ask, to SIG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll do a social media post for that, and the lead heads can go and post their questions for when you're doing your tours of specific answers they'd like you to get.
Yeah, that's definitely the important part of investigative journalism, is having the right questions asked. So we can get those questions to John. I think that's probably going to help him best get the information that everyone is looking for.
Absolutely.
They'll probably know before I even get there. I used to work there, so it's not going to be as easy for them to slip the wool over my eyes or whatever. And the same with the Army folks from the program Soldier Weapons, Picatinny Arsenal. I had dealings with them all through the 90s and 2000s, so at least I can speak their lingo, and it's not like just some amateur guy walking in there, asking questions like a reporter. I should be able to get, maybe get a little bit more information that'll help people out with what they want to know.
Yeah.
Well, Marty can sell you a fake mustache if you need it.
All right, Nate, Frontier Tactical.
Sure. FrontierTactical.com. We're all over social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all over the place. So just put in Frontier Tactical, you will find us. And we are very responsive to messages of any kind.
And talk about your new line of ARs, the FT series.
Sure. So we have kind of put a lot of design and engineering into the entire AR-15's platform and what it takes to make it completely modular and multiple caliber. A lot of people just stamp multi-cal on the lower. There's more to it than that. All of our FT series rifles and pistols come from the factory ready to go 100% multiple caliber, and that means enlarged ejection ports so that you can go all the way up to 50 Beowulf, all the way down to 17 Remington is what we've tested so far. So literally changing the game, so to speak, when it comes to the AR platform and what you know, and it doesn't have to be a single caliber rifle anymore. We're just changing barrels, bolts, and magazines and going through over 90 calibers.
Very cool. Makes great Father's Day gift.
Does.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Casey, real quick, what you got coming up competition-wise?
Well, competition-wise, I'm just now getting back into the game of it after we had our young'un, so...
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Baby boys at home?
Yep, little boys at home. Stayed in the NICU for over a month, so, I mean, we're definitely NICU graduates, I'll give you that. But no, I plan on getting back into the game pretty heavy. I'm going to try to get into some series matches and stuff like that back in there, especially like the Pro-Am coming up in August.
You going to be doing some PCC?
Well, I'm hoping Nordic sends me the PCC. I know they got them in the works, putting the competition magwells that people had seen some pictures of on Facebook.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, that's what we're going to be using. So I'm looking forward to seeing that because there's really high remarks about that and people love them. So, but I can't wait. So that's a biggie for me. And I enjoy the NC-15s and stuff like that Nordic sent me. And I know the 308. I can't wait to get my hands on one of those either. So.
I got one.
Yeah, don't rub it in. Don't rub it in.
All right, guys. So I'm not going to announce the winner of the projectile dysfunction contest. That's going to be next episode. We're running low on time here, but I do want to thank our other sponsors of the show, X Steel Targets, for all your AR-500 steel target needs. X Steel Targets has what you need. Check them out at xsteeltargets.com.
X Steel Targets.
Modern Spartan System. Optimize your firearms with Modern Spartan Systems. They have all the gun cleaning solutions, the lubes, the greases, and they've even got products for your vehicle. The old lead sled is over 300,000 miles and running strong. I've been using their TVT product in that. A little oil additive. You can put it in your gas too. And with these temperatures we've had lately, like almost up to 100 degrees, my oil has been running very thin, so I added that to my oil the other day, and it thickened it up and got my oil pressure back up. So great products. Check them out, modernspartansystems.com. And my biased Glock, the official carry of Left Hand of Talking Lead. That's right. I rock the Glock 23, the Glock 27. Love them. I'm a 40 cal guy. What do you think about that, John? 40 cal.
Yes, actually, one of my 3 carry guns is a Glock 23. It was one of the first, like, few thousand made. I bought it 20-something years ago, like 1993. But no, I've got one. It's got like 9 modifications on it. But that's one of my carry guns. And when I was at Smith and Sig, I taught quite a bit with the 40, and that's one of my 3 calibers I carry. So I'm good with it, man. But think of it this way: the 40,
finally another
one of the
40
first
guy.
calibers designed for shooting bad guys at close range. Right?
There you go.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a good caliber, and it's put down a lot of bad guys over the years, so good to go.
Yeah, it has. Very good. And then make sure you guys check out Tactical Squirrel for their monthly subscription tactical boxes. You get all kinds of cool swag each month sent right to your doorstep, and they're awesome Father's Day gifts as well. So if you go to Talking Lead's website, click on the Tactical Squirrel box link at the top of the homepage there. That'll take you right where you need to go. And as a lead head, as a supporter of Talking Lead, one of our listeners, you're going to get a special something in your first month's box. So make sure you go sign your dad up, sign your mom up, sign your dog up. They make great gifts and thank yous and support for our military men and women overseas as well. So
Hey, Marty.
Pick somebody and send one to them. Yeah.
You know that Tactical Squirrel box has had Frontier Tactical stuff in it before.
Oh, yeah? They have?
Just throwing that out there.
Well, that's the great thing about it is it's a surprise every month, too. And I'm going to be giving another one of those tactical squirrel boxes away to one of our lucky listeners. So make sure you listen to an upcoming episode, and we're going to give another one of those away. And then we're going to be announcing the winner of the projectile dysfunction and also the Talking Lead Head logo design contest, the 15th. By the time you guys hear this, that contest will be over. We'll be selecting the 3 finalists to win that contest, and the winner of that's going to get a T-shirt with that logo design, a patch with that logo design, the classic Talking Lead T-shirt, and a $100 gift card to 1776united.com. So go to 1776united.com, bottom of the page. If you get to hear this before the 15th, but I think it's the 13th today, so you're shit out of luck. Sorry, guys. So be checking our social media post the next episode, and we'll be making the announcement to who the 3 finalists will be. All right, that does it. John, thank you so much for your time. I know you put a lot of work into this episode, more than I really wanted you to, but man, I'm looking forward to our follow-up.
Oh, yeah. Glad to do it, man.
Yeah. Nate, thank you. Appreciate everything you do for us here at Talking Lead, and we're looking forward to our continued partnership.
Absolutely. We appreciate you having us on the show, and sorry Mike wasn't able to get the technological side worked out.
Well, maybe
tonight.
we can get Mike down on part 2. We might be able to get him in on that. And Ken, looking forward to sharing more smelly rooms with you.
Yeah, definitely.
CG3G, my brother. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, you and I will be hitting some competitions here soon, especially Rock Castle coming up.
Definitely. Good place to go shoot, by the way. Nobody's ever been there. I'd go check it out.
And let him shoot that SIG so he can get over his Glock infatuation.
Well, that was something I was going to say. Go ahead.
That's what I want to do. Absolutely. If I can get... Well, see, I was talking to... I'll just go ahead and throw it out there. Patrick Franks. I was talking to him about it because he's got one. Shoots for the USAMU. And, man, I'm really wanting to try that thing. Like,
Casey,
very bad.
You'll get to try one, so don't worry about it. John, is Sig going to Big 3?
You know, last time they canceled, I will find out. I'm going to ask.
Because that would be a great opportunity for us to get hands-on with that bad boy.
They need to
Marty
bring,
would probably be happier with a P238 rather than something else.
Why is that?
It's more your size.
It's more my size. What's that mean? Have you seen these mitts?
We actually just saw SIG down at Suffolk.
I got elf hands.
Pretty big demonstration down there. It was pretty good.
Oh, yeah? With the P320?
And the MPX and MCX and a bunch of the other stuff that they were courting the SOFIC community with.
All right, Leadheads, that does it for another episode of the Talking Lead Show. As always, Leadheads, keep your loved ones close.
And your firearms closer.
Oh, baby, like a choir. Love that. That was perfect.
Is this Skype thing, you know?
All right, give me some silence here. I'm getting ready to start.
Just they're using this to get audio.
Or don't. I'll get 10 seconds of silence here. God damn it. Quit moving your mic.